Wanna play?
Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play?
Wanna play?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wanna Play. My name is James McKenna, and today we've got our redo list of the top 10 greatest horror movies of the 1970s. But it's not just going to be just this one video, because over on Primetime Horror, of course, the person I'm collabing with today, next week he will be dropping our list of the top 10 more 70s horror movies in our personal opinion, because there's just so many of these freaking classic horror movies in the 70s. It's my personal favorite decade of horror. I think that the best 10-year stretch for horror is 1972 to 1982. Like, there's so much in those 10 years. And this is, it's my favorite decade for horror. So we're going to be doing this list, and of course the top 10 more 70s on Primetime Horror next week. But the series will continue because we will be doing 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s as a little bonus video for you guys. But before all that, we've got to do our initial list of our top 10 favorite horror movies from the 1970s. Let's get straight into it. At number 10, I couldn't not mention a giallo film because they're such a big part of this decade, and it's one of my favorite horror subgenres. So what I've gone for is going to be Deep Red. This movie is just phenomenal, and it's just so underrated. Like, a lot of people have heard of it, but not a lot of people have really gone out of their way to check it out, and I absolutely suggest you do that because it's worth it. This movie is great. It follows this musician who finds a dead body, and then he teams up with a reporter in order to kind of do their own investigation as to who did it, as to who the person is who killed the body that they discovered, of course. But slowly throughout the movie, more and more people that the reporter and the musician know in real life start getting killed around them. And then they quickly realize, of course, now they're being targeted by the Man in Black. And it's just so good watching all of this unfold. It has one of the most legendary and iconic jump scares in horror history. It's one of those things, kind of like the head explosion in Scanners, where so many people have seen it, but you just don't know where it's from. It's, of course, when that freaking doll comes out of the door on the side of the screen, like out of focus, and it just rushes like right at the screen. It's so legendary, and this is one of my favorite giallo films of all time, so I think it deserves a spot on this list at number 10.
Hello everybody, Ryan here, and starting off my list of top 10 70s horror movies is going to be the Amityville Horror. Now, I have never been crazy about haunted house movies. I haven't watched that many of them, admittedly, but out of all the ones I have watched, this is probably the one that creeped me out the most. And that's kind of crazy to me considering how old it is. I mean, this was probably one of the first genuinely scary haunted house slash ghost movies, and I love it for that fact. I think that it's an overall solid horror movie. I think that like all the ghost scenes are really well done. I don't think they're like too over the top or too ridiculous. I think that this movie just does everything in that aspect really, really well. I love how even though this is a ghost movie, and usually ghost movies are like kind of more slow burns, kind of like, you know, things happening in the background, something you have to really pay attention to. This one it does have that kind of stuff, but it's really tense. There's a lot of tense moments that keeps you locked in and keeps you watching, like more towards the end of the movie where things start building up and tensing up, and the house is just going insane, and they're freaking driving away, but then they forget the freaking dog, then he has to run back in, and then it's just a super overall fun watch. I think that it's an amazing haunted house movie, and that's a lot coming from me because I really don't like movies like that. And yeah, that was my number 10.
Number 9, of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's one of those ones that's kind of just required to be on this list because it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's one that everybody knows, everybody's heard of, everybody knows Leatherface, everybody's seen this movie, and everybody knows why it's so great, because it's just so low budget, yet they managed to make it so great and compelling, and they draw it out, but they draw it out perfectly. Like, this so easily just could have been another forgotten 70s slasher, because they could have just made the pacing just a little bit too long, but they paced it just right, and had just the amount of just insane kills that this managed to be one of the most classic horror movies of all time. Of course, you gotta talk about the kills. Like, Leatherface, the first kill of the movie, when he just hammers the guy out of the absolute blue. There's no music, no score, anything. He's just walking, all of a sudden Leatherface just comes in, smacks him over the head with the hammer, and then drags him into the back room. And then, of course, you got another one of the best jump scares, when he freaking comes out of the dark with the chainsaw and just chainsaws Franklin through the middle. You got one of the best final girls of all time in Sally. The directing, the lighting, everything about this is just so great. Like, I shouldn't have to talk about this for this long, because you've probably already seen it. It has to make the list.
Coming in at number 10 for me is going to be Alice, Sweet Alice. This movie I didn't really think I'd like at first, just from seeing clips, and I watched the trailer before watching this movie, and I didn't really think I'd like it, because at first it seemed like kind of a slow burn, old. I don't really like old slow burns. That's not really my kind of thing, but I watched it, and yeah, it does have some of the aspects of an old slow burn, but it is super different and super underrated. I barely hear anyone talk about this movie, and I don't know why, because this movie is so freaking good. I mean, the twist, I didn't even expect there to be a twist. I thought Alice was going to be the killer of the entire movie. I didn't even know there was going to be anything like that in this movie. So kudos to this movie for having an extremely unexpected twist and just keeping you watching through and through. I love the old 70s vibe. I love the old 70s slasher vibe. And I mean, the look of Alice, or whoever the killer is at the moment, the mask is just so creepy, the slightly see-through mask. I've always loved things like that, because you can tell there's a person behind the mask, but it's so distorted and it makes it look 10 times creepier. And I mean, I could just go on and on about this movie. This movie is extremely, extremely underrated, and if you haven't seen it, I strongly suggest you check it out. So that was my number 9, Alice, Sweet Alice.
Coming in at number 8 is The Omen. It's so good. Every freaking movie on this list is absolutely fantastic. Just, it's the reason why this is my favorite decade, and The Omen is no exception. It has one of, like, top 3 all-time greatest openings in horror history. It's unbelievable just how it all unfolds, like just this kid's birthday party, and that's all it is. Like, there's nothing creepy, there's nothing weird, there's nothing off about it. It's just Damien's birthday party, until all of a sudden, one of the maids just is seen on the top of this family's mansion, and just says, "It's all for you, Damien." And everybody slowly starts to look up like, what is happening? It's all for you. She freaking jumps off, hangs herself. It's unbelievable. And the movie just doesn't stop from there. All of the kills are insane. The freaking guy who gets decapitated, it's unreal. It's just so great. Just so awesome, so greatly paced, so creepy. This movie is legitimately terrifying. Damien is arguably the scariest kid in all of horror. Like, he's terrifying. Just, it's so good how everything unfolds. All of the creepiness, all of the legendary tropes that this spawned, all of the scene, just everything that happens, pretty much every scene in this movie is legendary. And it can't be left off the list.
Coming in at number 8 for me is going to be The Exorcist. Now, this movie is just, it's so iconic. I mean, I don't even need to say anything about how iconic it is. Everyone watching already knows. And I know in the most recent years, a lot of people have not been hating on this movie, but kind of saying that it's overrated. And well, me personally, I think it's perfectly rated, because, I mean, for the time it came out, it was an absolutely terrifying movie. It did so much for the horror genre from then till now, and I mean, it's just so utterly iconic. Everything from the freaking Reagan scenes where she's freaking throwing up green vomit everywhere, where she's freaking shoving crucifixes in her vagina, where I mean, so many just wowing moments, so many things that, like, if you were watching it at the time, you would, like, be freaking barfing in your seat, and I'm pretty sure that actually happened. I mean, it's just such an iconic horror movie, and not just that, it's just overall an amazing movie. There's just so much good to it. I mean, yes, it's pretty slow paced and it's kind of a slow burn, but it still keeps you watching because, I mean, you cut to a pretty averagely boring scene, you know, relatively boring scene, but then it cuts to some freaking crazy ass crap happening with Reagan, like she's freaking pushing someone out a window or something like that. It's just such a good movie. I mean, I love The Exorcist. I could go on and on and on about it. And such a good performance by Linda Blair. I mean, she was doing such insane, outlandish crap in this movie. Freaking cursing up a storm. Just doing all types of gross or dirty or just overall brutal crap, and she was just a little kid while doing it. It's such an amazing performance. I don't even think most adults would be able to pull off what she pulled off back then. I mean, kudos to Linda Blair for just putting on an amazing performance and being just a kid while doing it.
Number 7 is gonna be Phantasm. This movie will just warp your mind like nothing else. Like, it's the best mind-warping movie. If that's like a subgenre of movies, this is the best one. The tall man is just such a great character that we know absolutely nothing about. Like, by the end of the movie, you're still not even sure, like, if he exists, if any of this exists. You don't know what is real, what isn't, what you did see, what you didn't see. And although some people, that might be a little bit of a turnoff, which is why there are a lot of people who prefer Phantasm 2, because it's a lot more straightforward, I just think that it's just so good, the way that it just sucks you in and just plays with your mind. It's awesome. Another one with some legendary kills. Of course, the freaking spear that just goes around and just plants itself in people's heads. The set design is some of the best of all time. The freaking mausoleum looks amazing. Like, it's so good. All of the characters are memorable, and this spawned one of the coolest horror franchises of all time. All of the sequels have pretty much the exact same cast and crew as the original movie, and you literally, like, watch these people age through the years. The last one was in 2016, so it's so good. This movie is amazing, this franchise is amazing, and it's another one, quite like The Omen, just couldn't be left off the list.
Coming in at number 7 for me is going to be The Hills Have Eyes. Now, this movie I've always known about. I've always known about how popular and iconic it is, but for some reason, I never watched it until only a couple years ago, and let me tell you, I'm glad I did, because this movie, I mean, it really has it all when it comes to a horror movie. I mean, good characters, really good characters, even more of the side characters you don't really care about. They're still pretty fleshed out, and they have, like, some kind of, like, story behind them, something that makes them significant or different from all the other characters. They're just not copy and paste teens that you're just waiting to see get killed in a cool way. That's something I really appreciate about this movie, and also with the Jupiter clan as well. Even though they're the killers, and, you know, in most horror movies the killer is probably the least fleshed out character, they are pretty different from one another. Like I said, they're not just copy-paste like any other psychopathic hillbilly killers, and I really appreciate that about this movie. I also love how this movie is a really good mix between horror and action. I mean, you have so many cool fight scenes, you know, like towards the end when the main characters are fighting off one of the villains, and then he freaking survives an explosion and he doesn't die. Then he finally gets up and he freaking body slams him WWE style, and then the only way he dies is if he gets shot, which is kind of hard to believe that he survived an explosion but didn't survive bullets, but that's besides the point. Really cool fight scenes. Hell, even the dog whoops someone's ass in a scene. It just overall such a good movie, super original for the time it came out. It does have like some similarities to other deserty, the hillbilly killer type movies, like maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I feel like any inspiration that this movie took from those movies, it took it and kind of made it its own thing. And like I said, super original for the time it came out, and just an overall amazing, fun watch. And you know, I think this is a very good movie if you want to watch it with friends or family or something like that. And yeah, I'm just rambling at this point. That's how much I love this movie. That was my number 8, The Hills Have Eyes.
Number 6 is gonna be Black Christmas. I've pretty much talked about Black Christmas in every single top 10 list that I've like almost ever done, and there's a reason for that. It's because this is just one of the best of all time. A legendary slasher, one of the first to do what it did, with one of the most awesome villains that you never even see. Like, he's one, like, Billy, if that's even his real name, is one of the coolest horror villains of all time, and you literally only see the dude's eyeball. Just how insane he is and how creepy he is. And then all of the characters in this movie, sure, it's a slasher, but all of the characters have something to offer, something memorable about them, and it's just great. Of course, Jess Bradford as the final girl, played by Olivia Hussey, and then of course you've got Margot Kidder in here, the comic relief, and she does a freaking great job at that. This movie is awesome. Another one with legendary kills, and another one that's just so creepy. Just when Jess opens the door and sees the dead bodies of her friend just mangled and laid out on the bed, that's terrifying. Of course, when it zooms over to Billy's eyeball, and then of course throughout the movie when it keeps just randomly cutting back to Claire's body in the attic, just, it's so good. It has one of the best opening shots, it has one of the best ending shots, it's one of the best slashers, one of the best Canadian horror movies. It's the best, just everything that it does, it's one of the best at, and for me, it's gonna be number 6.
Coming in at number 6 for me is going to be Tourist Trap. Now, this movie is just so freaking good. I absolutely love this movie. I mean, it's one of those movies that really sits with you. Like, after you see it, you're like, what did I just watch? In a good way. It's just so weird, and, you know, it keeps you thinking, like, you know, oh man, that scene was crazy. Oh, that character was crazy. It's just one of those kinds of movies, and you know, it's just so different, and it's probably one of the most different movies on this list. I mean, everything from like Mr. Slauson, I mean, you can tell that there's something supernatural going on, but it's not explained. You can't really fully tell what's going on. I mean, you have mannequins moving and you don't know if they're actually living, or Mr. Slauson is kind of somehow telepathically making them move, and it's just so freaking creepy. And there's so many weird and creepy scenes, like when Mr. Slauson, you know, in his full doll getup, freaking walks up to the final girl with a freaking another mannequin head, and he's like, "See my friend," and then the freaking mannequin starts screaming, and then later on in that scene, when the mannequin head is on the floor, it just turns around by itself and starts screaming again. It's just such weird crap. You're like, whoa, what the hell is going on? And it's just so weird and different and just overall creepy, you know? This is a really creepy, unnerving movie. While there's not like a crap ton of gore, a crap ton of jump scares or anything like that, it's still one of those movies where you're like, oh god, that's so weird looking, you know? And the doll or mannequin effect that happens all throughout the movie, like whether it's just a normal mannequin or Mr. Slauson dressed up as a mannequin, it's just all super creepy. And stuff like that always creeps me out, like something that looks human but obviously isn't. It just has that weird unnerving feeling to it when you look at it. I love that about this movie. This is one of those movies that I love so much I don't want to watch it a lot because I don't want to wear it out. I mean, I'll watch this movie maybe once a year, if that, just because it's so good. I don't want to wear it out. I don't want to get too used to it because every time I watch it, I want to kind of re-experience it again, maybe notice things I didn't notice before, and just have fun with it. I don't want to, kind of wear it out like a crap ton of other horror movies that I've, watched over and over and over again. And yeah, a horror movie is good when I don't watch it like every month.
Now, all of these top 5 are in my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. Like, they're all on that list. And kicking off at number 5 is the most terrifying movie that I've ever seen, The Amityville Horror. Again, every time I talk about this movie, I have to bring up the fact that it is legitimately the movie that creeped me out the most. That rocking chair scene, it's petrifying. Like, even just thinking about it, thinking about what happens in that scene, the implications of it, it's unreal, like how creepy this is and how much it just gets under your skin with the stuff it does. It's the best haunted house movie of all time, flat out, period. It's unreal, it's unmatched, it's one of the best of all freaking time. It's the Amityville Horror. What else needs to be said about it? It's supposedly based on true events as well, so if that's true, which it probably isn't, but if it is true, great. The scariest movie I've ever seen is the one that's real. It's number 5 on the list.
Coming in at number 5 for me is going to be Alien. This movie, it's weird. This movie is one of those movies that kind of grew on me. First time watching it, I wasn't totally crazy about it. Of course, I thought it was good, but I was like, alright, cool little alien movie. But then over time, I started watching it more often. Then I slowly realized, wow, this is actually a really good movie. And this is one of those movies that, kind of like with The Hills Have Eyes, I always knew about, but just kind of put it off for some reason. And again, like I said with Hills Have Eyes, I am glad that I ended up watching it because, it, like I said, it grew on me. And it's now one of my favorite 70s horror movies of all time. I absolutely love it. It's so freaking creepy. I mean, the aliens in general are scary as hell. I mean, if I am freaking getting chased by any horror villain, the one I would want to be chased by the least is a freaking xenomorph, because you probably have like a -1% chance of surviving with those damn things, and it's just so freaking scary and so atmospheric. I mean, it's really, really, like, even like the empty space shots and like the spaceship is just kind of floating across the frame, and it's just such a cool look. And like when they land on the alien planet where they find the facehuggers, it's just such a weird, desolate planet. It's just so kind of unnerving, with the slight wind sound effect, and then when you're looking at it through the camera they have on screen and it's kind of distorted looking, then you just kind of see the spaceship off in the distance, and it's just really, really creepy looking. It kind of looks like something you'd see off of like a weird internet ARG kind of thing, and I absolutely love it. And another thing I love about this movie is how realistic it is. Now, obviously, in real life, we don't have spaceships that can travel to other galaxies, and obviously, we haven't encountered aliens, and we don't have freaking robot droids and whatnot, but even though this movie has all that, it's not over the top with it, so it seems real. It seems like that if we ever do get to that point where we have that kind of stuff, that's what it'll actually look like. It's not over the top to where you're like, oh, come on, what the hell is that, That's something that I've always really, really loved about this movie. Yeah, that was my number 5. It's another one of those movies that I could just go on and on about. There's so many aspects of this movie that I love, but don't want to make this video too long, so yeah, that was my number 5, Alien.
At number 4, of course, is The Wicker Man, the movie with the greatest twist ending, and maybe just the greatest ending of all time. It's so unbelievable. The entire movie, you're asking one question: what happened to Rowan? And then, of course, boy do you find out at the end there. But just everything about this, how it just makes you question everything, and it never lets you down. It never bores you. Just the whole time this is going on, you're just locked in. You need to know what happens. It does suspense, build up, and questioning the audience just so well. It's one of the best freaking horror movies of all time, and it's crazy to me that the director Robin Hardy never made another movie until the really terrible sequel, The Wicker Tree from 2011, because he could have made some of the most classic of all time. Literally, the one movie he did direct is an all-time classic, The Wicker Man. Christopher Lee just kills it in this movie, as he always does. He's one of my favorite actors of all time, and this is his best movie. In his own words, this is his best movie. So for me, of course, I can't not have The Wicker Man.
Coming in at number 4 for me, just a hair over Alien, is going to be Phantasm. This movie is just, I mean, mwah, it's just perfection. I mean, there's just so much good about this movie. It's another super original and unique movie. It's kind of like Tourist Trap in a way, where you watch this movie and then you watch other movies made within the same decade and you're like, this movie is just completely different from the rest. I mean, this movie is just so damn unique and just so freaking cool. I mean, everything from the tall man, even though in real life he's not so extremely tall, just the way he's shot in some scenes and the way that his clothes are like really tight, so it makes him look bigger and more like skinnier, and he just looks so like imposing. And when he's like, boy, and then he freaking snatches Jodie. I mean, it's just such a freaking good movie. And then you have other iconic things like the flying silver spheres. I mean, it's just so creepy how he uses, like, he's not like walking around with a knife or a chainsaw or a machete or just some basic killing utensil. In a way, he has freaking flying balls. You see those balls coming at you, you know you're dead. Pause. It's just so many iconic things. Then you got the little freaking dwarf type things with the red freaking jacket hood type things on. It's just so freaking good. And then another really good thing about this movie is the characters. I mean, they have such a unique relationship. I mean, Reggie, Mike, and Jodie, even though freaking Reggie isn't even related to them, they still feel like one big, one good, you know, family, you know? They have a really good relationship. They're not just kind of some basic friends, you know, that you'd see in some kind of other slasher, you know, just for them to get killed off. They're like one big trio fighting against this weird tall man flying balls force. It's just, I love how good the characters are, how fleshed out they are, the relationship they have with one another, how it's not just like some kind of big group of teenagers you're just waiting for them to see get killed off in cool ways, you know. It's just super original, super good, and yeah, that was my number 4, Phantasm.
Number 3 is our obligatory Halloween entry. It's Halloween.
Coming in at number 3 for me is going to be Carrie. Now, this movie is arguably the best Stephen King adaptation, up there with like Misery and The Shining. I mean, this movie is just that damn good. It's in like the top 3 Stephen King movies out of, like, I don't know, the freaking hundreds there's so many. This movie is so good, so unique, and it's really kind of sad in a way. This is one of the few horror movies where you kind of empathize with the villain, or not even the villain, the killer, I guess. You know, you empathize with her because, you know, she's freaking bullied to death. Then she goes home to her psychotic, freaking Jesus freak mom. And then, you know, she has kind of no escape in a way. School, home, and both of them suck. And, you know, it's just really sad for her. Then you get to her breaking point, the only good moment she's had in her life, the prom. She's prom queen. And then, you know, of course that gets ruined too. Her date freaking dies by a bucket, I guess, and then she just goes absolutely crazy on everybody. And you empathize with her, and usually I don't like when horror movies try to make you empathize with the killer or the antagonist, but this movie, I let it slide because, I mean, you feel so bad for this girl going throughout the movie, and yes, of course, killing freaking dozens of teenagers isn't good. This is another one of those horror movies that I don't watch too often because I don't want it to kind of get worn out and me not like it as much as I, you know, usually would. So yeah, that was my number 3, Carrie.
Coming in at number 2 is going to be Suspiria. An unreal just experience of a movie. When I talked about the set design of Phantasm, I said that was great. This movie's set design makes Phantasm set design looks like your friend's dirt hut in Minecraft. This is unreal. Just the colors in this movie, just how everything is just laid out, all of the characters, the costumes, and just how everything just unravels. The kills are all just memorable. Everything is just so weird and odd and eerie, and even by the end of it, you're still just like, what is going on? Like, just how everything, it's another one, again, I've probably said this a million times in this video, but just, again, how everything unfolds in this movie is just awesome, how it slowly reveals stuff piece by piece. It's great. Another one that has one of the all-time best opening scenes, that has one of the best all-time kills. Of course, the woman getting hung from the dance school. It just looks just so surreal. That's what this whole movie is. If there was one word to describe this movie, it's surreal. It's awesome. It's got without question, the best theme song in horror movie history. It's just the best. And just everything about this movie, it's unreal. It's one of my favorite of all time. Top three of all time. My number 1 pick is my number 2 favorite horror movie of all time. Number 1 is The Shining. Number 3, it's Suspiria. And it's going to be number 2 on this list.
Coming in at number 2 for me is going to be the original 1978 Halloween. Now, this movie is, I mean, do I really need to say much about this movie? I mean, come on. It's Halloween, Michael Myers, Dr. Loomis, Laurie Strode. I mean, what more do I need to say? This movie is just, it really changed the horror genre. I mean, this was one of the first slashers, in a way, popular slashers at least. I mean, of course you had Psycho and whatnot, but this movie kind of took some of the aspects of Psycho, made it its own, added its own original things, and it just freaking exploded into popularity. I mean, you wouldn't have horror movies like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, any other Michael Myers type slasher of the 80s. I mean, it's so damn iconic that you wouldn't have half of your favorite horror movies if it wasn't because of it. I mean, this movie is just so creepy and atmospheric. I mean, this movie has such a good atmosphere. I love horror movies with a good Halloween-esque atmosphere, with the, with the leaves blowing and with the freaking pumpkins and the 70s Halloween decorations. It just looks so good. And then you have Michael Myers, at the time, this new, weird, just like, is he supernatural? Is he just a dude killing? What's going on with him? Then how kind of ghost-like he is. First he's there, then he's not. Now you see him, now you don't. I mean, popping out of the freaking side of the bushes, camera changes, camera looks back, he's gone. In the sheets, camera looks at him, camera looks back, he's gone. I mean, he's just so mysterious, and he's so, like I said, ghost-like. And then you have scenes where he's just popping out of the darkness, and like when he stabs what's-his-face up against the freaking wall, and he's just hanging there. And then you have the somber theme music, and he's just freaking standing there with his head tilted. I mean, it's so creepy. Then, the scene where he's popping out of the shadows getting Laurie. I mean, I could just go on and on and on about Michael. And not only is there an amazing killer, but amazing characters to kind of go with him. Then you got Dr. Loomis, so set on killing Michael Myers, it kind of makes him unhinged in a way. Not nearly as bad as like Halloween 4 or 5, but I mean, freaking shoots him 6 damn times, doesn't die, and then you got a good final girl. And I mean, to today's standards, Laurie would probably be, just another basic final girl, but for the time it came out, it's brand new, fresh, just such a good performance by Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean, say what you want about her, but you cannot deny that she absolutely perfects the classic final girl tropes. I mean, such a good movie. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, what can I say that hasn't already been said about this movie a million damn times? I mean, so iconic, so good. that was my number 2.
Well, coming in at number 1, my second favorite horror movie of all time, you know what it is. It's Carrie. It's just the best. Like, of the 70s, it's just the best. And of horror, it's just the second best. The best ending of all time. Like, I questioned, maybe the ending to The Wicker Man was the best. I can flat out tell you that the ending to Carrie is the best ending in horror movie history. It is awesome. It just feels so earned, feels so amazing. It's just such a great moment. This movie is just so good. You've heard me talk about it a million times, just like pretty much all of the movies on this list other than Deep Red. I believe that's the only one that I haven't talked about at least 10 freaking times. But God, Carrie is just unbelievable. The performance by Sissy Spacek, it's amazing. The second greatest book adaptation into a horror movie, of course number 1 being The Shining. It's awesome. It's Carrie. You all know why I love it, and if you've seen it, I know you love it as well, because it's just amazing. And for me, it's gonna be number 1.
Coming in at number 1 for me is going to be the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, this movie is so damn good to me. I mean, it's like this movie was made for me in a way. I mean, it has everything that I love about a horror movie, and it does it perfectly. Everything from the crazy, unnerving scenes, and you're like, what the hell is going on? Like the dinner scene, or this freaking scene where Leatherface pops out and gets Franklin. I mean, it's just so unnerving and creepy and weird. And then, again, another thing I love about horror movies is a good atmosphere, good shots, like the scene where the sun is setting and one of the characters is just walking out into the distance, or where a character is walking up to the house for the first time. You get the shot of her and then the shot of the house, and it just slowly zooms in, and it's just such a good scene. I mean, then you got good characters, and now, of course, most of the teenagers aren't anything crazy. You can have them or you can't, but then, you got the unique ones like Franklin and Sally, and it's just such a good duo, them two. You got Sally, your kind of basic blonde character in a way, nice, innocent girl, just perfectly fine, perfect final girl. And then you have freaking Franklin, this freaking absolutely annoying, arrogant dude in a wheelchair. It's just so good. And then you have the freaking killers, the cook, freaking the hitchhiker, Leatherface. I mean, come on. Absolutely iconic characters. This is one of those movies that it doesn't just have one iconic antagonist. It doesn't just have 2 iconic antagonists. It has freaking 3. Hell, even 4 if you want to include Grandpa. I mean, just such a good movie. And then you have like crazy intense scenes that are keeping you watching. Sally jumps through a window like freaking 2 times, and then the iconic morning chase scene where Leatherface and the hitchhiker are chasing after Sally. I mean, dude, so good, so iconic. In recent years, I've heard people say that this movie is too hyped up and it shouldn't be in the, classic horror movies genre, I guess you could say. And I'm like, dude, I mean, I am one to let people have their opinion, it's fine, but when people say that, they're just wrong. I am sorry. This movie is just so damn good. And, and to today's standards, the plot itself, just the basic bare bones plot is, basic, but it was so different for the time it came out. The early 70s, there was nothing like that. Kind of like when The Exorcist came out, there was nothing like The Exorcist. This movie is just so damn good. I hold it so near and dear to my heart. It's one of my earliest memories in horror. This is one of the very few cases where the first movie in a franchise I see is the first, and I don't think this movie will ever be out of my top favorite horror movies of all time. Now, that was my top 10 70s horror movies lists. I'll stop talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre now. I don't want to make this video too long, and yeah, that was my number 1, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So thank you for watching our list of the top 10 greatest horror movies from the 1970s. Let me know your list in the comments down below, and of course, if you haven't already, go subscribe to Primetime Horror. You won't be disappointed, especially if you liked his picks today, if you liked what he had to say. All of that and more can be found over on his channel. And of course, as I said in the opening, you will see a sequel video to this over on his channel of 10 more of our favorite horror movies from the 1970s. And from then on, we'll be doing 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. I just filmed both of those back to back, so I do feel a little bit out of it now. I apologize. But until next time, I want to thank you all very much for watching. So goodbye and good night. Bang.